Welcome back, educator, to the Cool Cat Teacher Talk. Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching. I'm John Davis, the producer. It is the first week of school, so we planned 4 powerful interviews to inspire you this week. First, we've got Jacob Kirksey about the teacher certification crisis. Then we'll talk to Malia Hollowell about brain-friendly ways to teach reading. We'll then discuss 6 ways to teach writing in the classroom with Nancy McCabe. Finally, we'll talk to the host of the popular educational kid podcast, Who's Smarted? Jerry Kolber. That fun podcast teaches math to kids, as well as science, history, and more. There will be a link to it in the show notes. So our first guest up today is Jacob Kirksey. He aired in a 10-minute teacher podcast earlier this summer, but just this week, we got a message on LinkedIn where Jacob said, "Hi, Vicki. I want to thank you again for inviting me on the podcast as HB2 was forming. The legislation and its teacher prep components made it over the finish line barely." So the research in this interview was done by Jacob as a result of what happened after Texas relaxed its certification requirements. Let's take a listen. Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
Jacob Kirksey, today's guest, made an incredible post on LinkedIn about some research he's done. He's an assistant professor of education policy in the College of Education at Texas Tech University. Jacob, thanks for coming on today's show.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about this research in the area of qualified teachers. Can you give us just a high-level summary, and we will link to the full research in the show notes?
So what was really interesting to me is Texas prepares a majority of its teachers through alternative certification pathways. And these pathways vary dramatically in terms of quality. But then post-pandemic, we started to just hear conversations around no one's seeking certification at all. And we have empty classrooms. And now we need bodies, for lack of a better term, to fill those classrooms. And so here, I think the Dallas Morning News was the first to really shout out that it was a third of new teachers were uncertified in the hiring year. And I actually found that technically, yes, it was a third of new teachers were uncertified. But if you look at first-time teachers, so teachers not coming back from FMLA, not coming back from taking a year off, it was actually over 50% of new first-time teachers were completely uncertified.
And this is in the state of Texas.
And that was in the state of Texas. And this last year, it was 56%.
Well, I have to admit, I was not certified when I got in, but I was in computer science. But I've moved towards it. So you're saying over half are coming in no preparation at all?
That's right. And to be clear, when I say uncertified, I'm not talking about like a temporary permit to teach. I'm not talking about like a probationary certificate.
Okay.
I'm talking about they have gone through no sort of formal process to receive even temporary certification from the state. They are literally being hired on without any formal preparation whatsoever. But to your last point, I was really interested in that too, because I think you can see some value in bringing some career and technical education teachers in from industry and leverage the experience they have and maybe work with them to get certified eventually.
Yeah.
But when you look at who these teachers are, they are evenly spread at the same distribution as a regular certified teacher is. They're equally represented in early childhood classrooms, elementary classrooms, special education self-contained classrooms. And so it wasn't just that we're seeing more uncertified teachers and they're filling our CTE classes. They're filling even classrooms with like our littlest ones that are in education.
And I want to be clear. I respect all teachers and we all come from different paths. But I will say that probably within 3 years, I did 100 hours worth of educational training. My mom was a teacher. My sister was a teacher. They actively mentored me on a weekly basis. So we don't want to tell people they can't get in and learn. So we have a teacher hiring crisis. And so people are just getting people that they can get. So what's the impact on learning?
I also want to be clear. I think, a lot of uncertified teachers have a real passion for this stuff, and they really do believe that they can come in and fill a void. But I do think we need to be clear that passion is not enough. It takes that passion and it takes some training and some skill to really make a good impact on kids. And so in terms of what having an uncertified teacher on average links to it, it's learning loss. We find that just 1 year of having an uncertified teacher for our grades 3 through 8, those students are losing on average 3 months of learning in math and 4 months of learning in reading. And if you start to look
Wow.
at some of the earlier grades that aren't tested in math and reading, you see that those students are much more likely to be absent from school. So there's signs of some greater disengagement. In Texas, like students are required to be screened for dyslexia their first year of schooling.
Okay.
What we find is that if you had an uncertified teacher in that first year of your schooling, you were significantly less likely to be diagnosed for dyslexia. And so we see a significant misdiagnosis problem going on that now is undoubtedly going to, spread into future grades in terms of getting the services that these kids need.
As a mom of a dyslexic myself, I can't even imagine the harm that would be done to children who are dyslexic and are not diagnosed. Dyslexia can be worked with, but we need to know it's there. Are you saying loss from what it should have been or loss from where they came in with this knowledge and they regressed?
It's lost from where they should have been. So it's
Okay.
compared to if you were to have a teacher prepared in a different pathway.
Okay.
Texas is a big state. We have the most rural number of districts in the country. Unsurprisingly, we find more rural school districts are struggling the most when it comes to filling vacancies. There were 40 counties that had 80% or more of their new hires be completely uncertified, and they were mostly rural in Texas. Our rural districts are really hurting right now. One other kind of key thing that stands out to me is about 1 in 5 of these new uncertified teachers doesn't have a bachelor's degree. So we really are seeing that there is not only a difference in the preparation, but in general, we see that their backgrounds and the likelihood that they even have a lot of that content knowledge to be supporting kids is not there as well.
So you're saying no college degree at all?
No college degree at all. No college.
I mean, this just almost makes me physically ill. I mean, and this is just Texas. We'd have to look at it other places, but I live in a rural area. Was your goal just to ring the alarm bell and help people understand? Because the truth is, education colleges are shrinking. Some colleges, half of their whole college was teachers, and part of it is just valuing teachers. Teachers are important. We have to relate to educate. We also need to have a passion and a knowledge about our content and a desire to know how to teach. What are we going to do?
No college. I think raising the alarm bells has worked. I think people are starting to pay attention to it. But here's my thing, right? If we want to, like you said, make teaching a desirable profession and one that we want high quality adults in front of our kids every day, we have to make teaching a rational economic choice. No college. You would not be a rational human being, economically speaking, today if you were to choose to go into teaching. And the reason that is you would potentially be paying tuition, so dedicating your college degree to this, paying additional program fees to go back after your bachelor's degree to become a teacher and receive that training. And most of the time, you dedicate at least a semester to full-time student teaching where you don't have a job. So you're foregoing a salary. In many cases in Texas, in these fast track programs, they do with a whole year of teaching, and that counts as their student teaching placement. So they're getting a whole salary. So for me, it's okay. We want to make sure that it is affordable, it is easy to get into high quality teaching programs. And so in Texas, we have what's called the residency certificate, where hopefully this legislative session, we are potentially going to add funding to the residency certificate so that residents would be eligible for like a $20,000 stipend during their student teaching, which doesn't pay all the bills, but it's certainly better than not getting any salary whatsoever. Once teachers are in the classroom, we now need to reward them for their effectiveness. They are successful. Now we need to make it to where they like being a teaching. They feel like they're being compensated for that. So I think, raising teacher salaries based on effectiveness is a really big thing here in Texas. But if we don't tackle both sides of the pipeline, it's just going to continue to leak, right? And we're going to continue to have all this patchwork going on. And that is really what has derailed the teaching profession here in Texas.
Well, and when you have veteran teachers and then they start finding out that new teachers right out of college are being paid more money, when that gets uncovered, that makes teachers angry, and it's everywhere.
Absolutely. There's two other people I'm concerned about. One, the uncertified teachers who now have been teaching a year or more. great. They've spent that time, they've gotten some experience. Unfortunately, there was probably some learning loss on average that went along with it. But
Yeah.
how do we support them? They clearly want to stay in school. So
Yeah.
how do we make sure that we are supporting them? But then my other concern, and this is where I feel like we really need to plug the uncertified teacher leak, so to speak, and that is our certified teachers. Because not only, right, are you now potentially teaching down the hall from someone making a commensurate salary to what you are, but you are now supporting them. Like if you're on a curriculum team together or
You
you
are.
need to go assist with classroom management, and now that was never part of your job description. That was not what you signed up for as teaching. You want to be there 100% for your kids. With an influx of uncertified teachers, that means there's an influx of just a lack of preparation and a desperation for those folks who are prepared and they are trained and they are, of course, going to support how they can. Now they're enduring additional stressors on the job.
They are, because when you inherit someone from an inexperienced teacher, and all of a sudden I'm like, I have all these gaps from the kids coming up to me that I never had before, which requires a complete pacing change, curriculum change, because now I'm having to teach prerequisites for what I'm teaching because I had somebody who was ahead of me who taught kids and didn't either follow the curriculum, didn't know better, whatever. This can happen with really anybody who is new, because you do have different curricula in different schools. It does cause stress and strain. It also means your expert teachers have to be in the hall monitoring the hall. So it is a lot of extra stress and strain.
We talked earlier about the decline in enrollment in traditional colleges of education. And that is what makes me a fervent supporter of high quality alternative certification programs. There is a real opportunity to mitigate what you just talked about as a common experience that we hear, which is number one thing, teachers get in the classroom and they don't know how to manage a classroom. But imagine you have a pre service experience, a training in a program where you spend a significant amount of time watching a high quality teacher,
Yeah.
mentor, demonstrate for you what it is like to monitor or to differentiate in this scenario, or what happens when a kid throws a chair. Those veteran expert teachers are the ones that have that instinct, have that previous experience to know
Hmm.
what to do in those situations. And we know this from psychology. It is a lot easier for us to feel like we can do something and thus will do something if we can see it modeled for us. And that's where I think a lot of this classroom management piece, the discipline monitoring in school hallways, all of that should be something that you're not experiencing for the first time when you're
Yeah.
leading your own classroom.
So I love working with new teachers because sometimes something will be seemingly a big deal and we'll talk about it, or they'll see me handle it and they'll say, "Hey, okay, why are you not having any trouble with that class?" Or like, I never really have to say a word in my classroom addressing an issue. And they're like, "Well, I don't have to get a comeback. I don't have to be," I'm like,
And so,
no. And there's such a light bulb moment, but I'm not sure even in education schools they teach that. So I would say all new teachers, that's the stuff I learned from my mom and my sister.
and so,
Teaching is important. We need content knowledge, but we also need that experiential knowledge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You need the passion, you need the content knowledge, and then you need the knowledge and how to teach the
Yeah.
content.
So, Jacob, I got to ask this question. So, I was speaking to healthcare professionals about artificial intelligence and turned up some really interesting research on how much faster nurses could be trained if they went into a VR lab and they interacted with AI patients. They had their coach or their teacher talking in their ears about, how to handle different situations. It's difficult because they're real kids who go home and have real impacts because of that. I'm just curious if you've heard of anybody using VR in the interaction with AI students to train teachers.
With AI, there's a lot of really promising things that can be incorporated as part of one's training. But that's the key word that stands out to me is training. We're not training uncertified teachers. We're saying that you don't need training. And that's where I think it's a really dangerous place that we're at right now is the moment we say you don't need training to be a teacher is the
Oh,
moment we have completely just deprofessionalized teaching and everything we know from the
that's right.
research and from lived experiences. And so
So your blog is jacobkirksey.com. Thanks for coming on and thanks for letting your curiosity take you to some important places, whether it's student absenteeism or teacher preparation and effectiveness. These are important topics, and teaching is still noble. Teaching is important, and it's an art. And anytime you have an art, there is an artisanship that goes along with it that we have to pass from one teacher to another. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without the many, many dozens of teachers who poured into me and taught me these things. And I want to do that for younger teachers, for those who want to be there. I know that this is a frustrating time, but we have to value ourselves. I know that I am making a difference and you're making a difference too. And Jacob, your research is making a difference. So keep encouraging and thanks for coming on.
thanks for having me.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Welcome back to Cool Cat Teacher Talk, where we talk about what matters in the classroom. You've just heard about the accreditation crisis in the state of Texas, which led to the passing of HB2 in that state. If you're looking at the news, the crisis is just about everywhere. Teacher training and certification is really important. Next, we're going to move on to an interview with Malia Hollowell as we talk about brain-friendly ways to teach reading.
So excited today to be talking to Malia Hollowell. We're going to be talking about reading. So her website is Play-Doh-to-Plato.com, and she is the author of The Science of Reading in Action, Brain-Friendly Strategies Every Teacher Needs to Know. So what are these brain-friendly strategies for reading?
This is my favorite subject, Vicki, and I'm so excited to share just a couple of them. One of them is taking our sight words or our spelling words and actually sorting them by phonics and spelling rule. When I learned how to teach reading, I didn't learn a whole lot. I'm of the era back in the early 2000s where we were told that students can magically learn how to read by just looking at books that they're interested in. And of course, now we know that is not true. We have 7 decades of research that have proven that is just not the way that most students will learn how to read. They really need us as teachers to help them connect the dots. And so taking our sight words and our spelling lists and sorting them is one of these simple little tweaks that we can make that will help them connect the dots a lot faster and a lot easier. So what you're going to do is take your list, and rather than having students learn these words in the order that you're given them, you are going to sort them by the phonics or spelling rule that is the primary focus of that word. So let's take a word like can. We would teach that word can when we are teaching students about the short A sound. And not only would we teach them the word can, we would also practice the word am or and, all of those short vowel words that have that short A sound. Now, it sounds really simple. Sorting it can take some time, but I promise the payoff is going to blow your socks off. It really helps students focus on just one phonics or spelling rule rather than having to stretch their brain and understand the huge range of phonics and spelling rules that we usually throw at them when we're giving them these lists.
So I was a child of the phonics era. I learned to read in the 70s. And I remember if it was and, we had pan and can and man. We had all those at the same time. We had a set of books, the Bob books, I think, or maybe I read those to my children. That makes sense to me as somebody who learned with phonics. But see, I never remember getting the word list by the rules, but I remember learning them that way. So it just makes sense. A lot of times, can you get these word lists just already pre-sorted for teachers? Because I know one thing about AI, it's terrible at alphabetic and it cannot do the phonics. That's just the fact of where we are.
Yes, we've actually tried to use AI for writing decodable passages based on one phonics or spelling rule, and it is a disaster. Yes, I agree with you. We're not there yet, but yes, we have pre-sorted lists that teachers are able to download from our site, and it will do all of the heavy lifting for them. So they don't have to sit for hours and try and figure out where the word said belongs in the sequence.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so what's another brain-friendly rule?
Well, let's stick with sight words here because I know that a lot of teachers are required to teach them in their classroom, either sight words or spelling words, and this will work for both. So I was taught that when we are having students learn these words and memorize these words so that they can recognize them when they see them in books or in text, that we need to give them a stack of flashcards and we need them to drill those flashcards 5 times a day, every single day, all week long. And what we now know is that is not how students memorize words. We do not use our visual memory. Instead, we have a human superpower for spoken language. We have this magical ability as humans, when we're born, to be placed in the middle of a home and listen to the people around us speaking and communicating. And we can naturally learn how to understand what they're saying and then speak back to them. So we want to use that to our advantage as teachers. We want to take our human superpower for spoken language and apply it to this new skill in terms of the history of humans, this new skill called written language. And so what we're going to do is have them actually listen for the sounds in the words first. So if we're practicing the word can, we would have them say the sounds k, a, n. We can make this multi-sensory by having them actually tap on the table or on their hand. So k, tap, a, tap, n, tap. Now we're going to have them connect those sounds to the written letters. So we're going to have them, again, say each sound, and this time they're going to write the letter C. When they say A, they will write the letter A, and N, they will write the letter N. And now their brain has been warmed up. It started with their human superpower for being able to hear those spoken sounds, those tiny little parts of the word, and we're bridging it and connecting it to this new thing called written language.
One of my children is dyslexic, and I have a lot of dysgraphia, but dyslexic. And one thing that we learned to do, because, it did take him longer to learn to read, but he's a great reader now. When you have a child gifted with that, don't think they can't learn to read. My other kids learned in K4, and he wasn't a solid reader till 4th. But I remember I was taught to, as we sounded it out, to write the letter on his back as he wrote it on a board. And we used something called handwriting without tears because it was so hard for him. He had so much going on in there. But I like how you're breaking it down and you're giving the steps because it just makes sense.
Once you learn about the research, it does make sense. It's almost like you hear these facts and you think, well, yeah, of course. Why aren't we doing it that way? It's a remembering rather than a mind-blowing revelation.
Yeah. Okay. You got a third?
Yes. I'll actually stick with dyslexia since that is personally relevant to you and your family. So what we actually know is that on average, 20% of our human population will be affected by some level of dyslexia. That is important for educators in particular to know because learning how to support our dyslexic students is essential. We're going to have 1 out of 5 students on average in any classroom affected by dyslexia. So it's really important that every single teacher on this planet is able to effectively support them. And the good news is that dyslexia support is actually going to benefit all kids. We know helps them is to focus on the sounds. Dyslexia is actually largely an auditory processing difficulty. And so when babies are born, within hours of them being born, they can put electrical wiring on their head and measure how the baby is processing sound. And they'll be able to predict with incredible accuracy whether or not that child will be affected by dyslexia because they will process the sound differently. So as classroom teachers, we can help students by giving them opportunities to practice hearing sounds and words and moving those sounds around. And you'll notice here, I did not say we're going to have them practice looking at letters and moving those sounds around. This is not a visual activity. We are just focusing on hearing. So if I gave that word, again, can, to the class, I would ask them to break that word apart into its individual sounds. K, a, n. Then I might say, let's change the k in can to What's the new word? Man. Then I might say, let's change the n in man to d. What's the new word? Mad. And now we could keep going down the list, creating this word ladder, we like to call it, where we're changing just one sound at a time and having students get practice, not only hearing the sounds, but moving those sounds around. And that is going to help, again, every student in class, but especially those students with dyslexia who have a difficult time hearing that sound and moving it around. We want them to have the opportunity to practice over and over and over again, get lots of review, lots of opportunities to strengthen that skill.
Because one thing I learned as a mom of a dyslexic is that pretty much all kids can have struggles with moving letters around. They won't do an official diagnosis, at least back in, quote, that day, until after 1st grade. So when you accommodate, you are helping all of the children. So let me ask you this. You have something really interesting on your book byline. You said that Instagram doesn't always get it right. Now, we know that's true. But could you give me some specific examples of like, okay, I think Instagram is getting this wrong?
Yes, I'll give you one that I certainly believed for years and years and years. I believed that using leveled reader books was the way to go. And when I say leveled reading books, these are books that are published by publishers like Fountas and Pinnell. They have an entire series of these leveled reading books. And you'll know they're leveled readers because they'll usually say a number on the cover. So it'll say level A, level B, level C. Now, what's interesting about these books is when you open them up to any page, you'll notice a couple of things. If they're a book that's designed for new readers, so a level A book, you'll notice that very often the words are going to repeat. So it will say, I see a red dog. And there will be a big red dog on top of those words, and it will give those picture clues to students about what the words actually say. And you'll turn the page and it will again say the same words. I see a green frog, and there will be a big green frog. Now, what we now know is that, number one, it's not really reading. That is not giving students the chance to figure out how to sound out words they haven't seen before. It's giving them a chance to memorize patterns, notice patterns, apply repetition to their reading. It's also giving them great practice at gathering picture clues. But again, that's not reading. What we want to do is we want students to really focus on gathering and strengthening the skills they need to sound out unfamiliar words. And the best way we can do that is to make sure we're giving them the chance to read words that reinforce the phonics and spelling rules we are teaching them. So if we are teaching that short A lesson in our class, we want students to read books that are filled with short A words. We want them to be reading a man can stand. I don't know, I made that up, but you get the idea. So that's one example of, again, so many I could give you where Instagram does not always get it right. And I will say literacy curriculums don't always get it right. And teacher trainings don't always get it right. I am shocked at the number of times that I've gotten a DM or an email from a teacher who has taken a picture of their teaching manual and it's showing outdated strategies and outdated tips that we now know are not only not based on science, but they actually go completely against the research.
Wow. You know, reading is just so important because it unlocks everything else. But it seems like, how do I say this? So Instagram is all about selling, right? It's about selling. And so we have to be really careful as educators getting our knowledge off of an Instagram or social media type site because there's a recency bias. So if it's new, we're more likely to see it. And a lot of times the time-tested, research-strengthened strategies just aren't being talked about because old stuff doesn't usually go viral, right? So where are the communities that reading educators are congregating these days?
While Instagram does not always get it right, there are several Instagram accounts that do get it right. In fact, I would say there are probably more than several. There are probably 100 or more. It's doing your due diligence and finding the sources that you can trust that are backing up their statements by being able to give you the source or the research or the citation of the scholarly article that defends what they're saying. And if you are ever in doubt, do not feel shy about reaching out to that Instagram influencer or creator and asking where they got this knowledge. They will be able to very quickly send you the link to the article or the study if that is in fact how they got the fact or that recommendation.
So let's give a pep talk to reading teachers everywhere, even parents. Like, what's your encouragement for that? It's not always easy to teach reading. It takes time and it's a process.
Yes, absolutely. I find great comfort in the research that shows that with brain-friendly strategies and tools in place, 95% of students can learn to read by the end of first grade. Knowing that with the right research-based strategies, we are able to help every single child in class become a thriving, successful reader is incredibly empowering. And it gives us hope. Yes, we may need to lean into the research. We may need to learn about the science of reading and make some tweaks and changes to our curriculum and our lesson plans. But once we do that, once we have our system in place, we will be able to benefit these children not only this year, but for years to come. Every class that comes through our doors is going to benefit from the time that we're taking now to learn what is best practice.
So your website, Play-Doh to Play-Toe, has a lot of free resources. What are some of your most popular free resources that people can go in the show notes, follow it to your site and download those.
Well, I will make sure to send all these links to you. One of my favorites is our editable sight word games, and we have a lot of them. The reason I love them is because, as we were talking about earlier, we know it's really important to give students the opportunity to practice reading and writing words that they are actually learning about. So when we're teaching that short A lesson, we want them to read and write those short A words. Well, traditionally, before we had technology, you would probably have to go and make one short A game to use in your literacy centers and a different short E game. And that takes a lot of time, and we know teachers are busy. They don't have time for all of that. So we wanted to make it really fast and easy for you to take the same game and pop in the words that you need students to practice that week, print it off, and then if you have a different group of students who needs to practice a different phonics skill or a different spelling rule, you can very easily pop in those new words and print off the same game that is highly targeted and differentiated for a different need.
Well, that's fantastic. Have you tested any of the AI reading tools out there? Because, there's free one from Google, free one from Microsoft. Other folks have free ones.
I have not. My focus is really on pre-K through second grade. And one of my core beliefs is that it's really important for us to give students the opportunity to have as much hands-on experience as possible. I am a huge advocate for giving students the chance to interact and engage and play literacy games with their classmates and sit across from each other at the table and roll a die and move their little token, 5 spaces and come to the new word. So for me, that is my soul, and I am just a fierce advocate for that hands-on engagement practice.
We have to be so careful about too much screen time for younger kids. So there may be a place, but it's not every place. And they're also learning a lot more than reading. They're learning how to collaborate, cooperate, get along with other human beings. And that's still as important as it's ever been. Malia Hollowell, her book is The Science of Reading in Action, Brain-Friendly Strategies Every Teacher Needs to Know. I know you have a podcast. You have a website. Thanks for coming on and talking about reading and the science of reading. It's just such an important subject.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Welcome back to Cool Cat Teacher Talk, where we talk about what matters in the classroom. I'm John Davis, the producer of the show. Just heard brain-friendly tips for teaching kids how to read. You can get the show notes down at coolcatteacher.com. Now we are going on to Nancy McCabe with 6 ways to teach writing in your classroom.
I'm excited to welcome Nancy McCabe. She's an accomplished writing instructor and author who directs the creative and professional writing program at the University of Pittsburgh at Bradford. And she teaches in the low residency graduate program in writing at Spalding University. Nancy has over 35 years of teaching experience, and she has published 9 books. So, Nancy, you are a great one to talk to us about teaching writing, practical strategies that we can use to improve our student writing. Where do you start when you work to teach kids to write?
No matter what age I'm teaching, I usually start with free writing, just writing continuously without thinking on paper, not worrying about grammar or spelling, but just continuing to write for the 10 minutes or whatever time we've established, seeing what comes out of the subconscious. Usually we start there just to generate some ideas. Depends on what genre we're dealing with. If we're writing say, creative nonfiction, we might start with a list of 10 turning point events in our lives and then take one of those and free write about some different dimensions of it. Maybe do one free writing where we're just writing dialogue, or one free writing where we're writing about setting and sensory impressions, breaking it down into a whole lot of different perspectives, maybe writing about what this particular turning point moment meant to them, what effect it had on their lives, maybe writing about an object that was very important during this event. So we do a whole bunch of different 10-minute writings to just generate ideas. And students often say that they have forgotten things that come out during that writing.
Does the fact that you're a published author make a difference as you teach writing?
I like to think so. I didn't really set out to be a teacher, but I always loved to write. And then when I found out that I could share my passion in the classroom with students, that was what really motivated me. I can bring in something that I love, that my life has revolved around, reading and writing, and share it with students.
You've already shared the 10-minute writing prompt, which is perfect for the 10-minute teacher. Do you have any other favorite writing prompts or exercises that you're like, hey, writing teachers, this works for students of all ages? Because sometimes in the age of AI, it's tough to get kids to actually sit down and write, but we've got to do that now more than ever.
I have a lot of different things that I've done. For instance, one of the things that I really like to do to connect reading and writing, we might read a particular story or a poem or creative nonfiction piece. And then I'll ask them to try writing an imitation where they take the piece and they imitate it noun for noun, verb for verb. They don't absolutely have to know the parts of the speech to do this, but they plug in their own material. And that's a great way to look closely at somebody else's writing style and to see what they're doing and how they're putting stories together. So that's one that has worked really well for all ages. Another one, I've worked as a writer in the schools, and one of the things that I always started with was just talking about the 5 senses and writing where we generated details related to those senses. One thing that's fun to do is just to take a nature walk and then write down what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, and then later try to put that into a piece of writing, a poem or a story, or a creative nonfiction piece. Those are a few. I also sometimes play around with metaphors. I got this idea from, again, being a writer in the schools and having students think about the elements of different things. Say I would give them the word piano, and we would think of all the parts of the piano, the keys, the pedals, the strings, everything that goes into a piano. We would come up with an abstract concept, say like love, and we would then just talk about like, what do we associate with love? What are songs that we associate with love? And then I would sort of turn it all on them and say, okay, so what if the world were reversed and pianos were love and love were pianos? What would happen? And that forces people into a sort of metaphorical mindset. You have to make this sort of abstract leap to do that. And I found that worked really well with kids. College students are a little bit tougher because they want to be logical. They struggle to move into that mindset where you're just making these intuitive leaps. But I've worked with graduate students and had them do this, and they do a really fabulous job on it too.
There's so many exciting things you can do in writing. I went here in the state of Georgia when I was in high school to the Governor's Honors Program in Communicative Arts. And one of the most powerful things that we did, and really one of the best poems I've ever written, they took us to a cemetery. And we had to find a place, and we had to write about the person we thought that was buried there. And some really powerful writing came out of a writing field trip, and sometimes at a school, you can like go across the street or you can just go to an interesting corner of the school to just inspire kids. These thought pictures and these things that you're suggesting are just really great.
I love that. One time I taught a workshop where we took graduate students on a field trip to a cemetery. And then we just walked around for an hour and just sort of, took notes. Some people sat on benches and wrote. Then we went back to campus and everybody wrote something. And it was so cool because it was a very open-ended prompt and everybody wrote something different. One student wrote this wonderful piece that was on the names that he had seen in the cemetery and what he associated with those names. Someone else wrote, there was one particular grave, had this monument. It was called Jesus is My Swing Set. And it had Jesus leaning down from the clouds and swinging a statue of the kid. It was a child that had died. It was very sad, but it was this very complicated monument that his family had put together for him. She wrote a really great researched piece. Like she went back and talked to different people about how that particular monument came about and about that child's life.
Wow.
And so that was really cool. One person wrote a whole piece about class and how class is reflected in the cemetery. Some people have these really fancy graves and other people have very basic ones. It was really cool to see all the different directions that people came from, just going to different places and thinking about the different approaches you could take to writing about that can be really great.
That's awesome. Now, one thing you've written and talked about is what happened to writing during the pandemic. What did you find?
Yeah, that was so tough because we were teaching online and it actually isn't too hard to teach a creative writing workshop online when you have 7 or 10 students. Because you can all see each other and you can kind of replicate the experience of a workshop. But people were kind of depressed. They had trouble generating things. I tried to get my students to write about the pandemic and they were like, we don't want to write about this. And I said, you guys are living through a historical time. It's like, but we live it every day. We want to write about something else. We want to write fantasy stories. So there was a lot of impulse to escape from circumstances. My students didn't especially want to write about it. I did teach a class in the healing power of writing to undergraduates. And that was actually really good during the pandemic because people were feeling isolated and revisiting memories and their past and having more time to think about things. And so that was a really good class to teach. And that, again, was on Zoom.
Just think everybody just wanted everything to go back to normal. But are your students now going back and writing about the pandemic?
I've had maybe 1 or 2 students in the last 5 years write about it at all. Mostly they just don't want to, especially my students that are traditional ages who were in high school, say, during the pandemic. Some of them, I'm trying to think, some of them would have been in middle school. What I've noticed too, and that I've seen studies that back this up, is that there's sort of a lag in skills and even maturity because they weren't in a classroom. They weren't in social situations.
Folks who say that AI is the answer to teaching and we're just going to put them in front of a screen for 3 hours, I'm kind of like, did we not learn anything during the pandemic? A lot of rotten things happen in the pandemic to a lot of people. Sometimes I feel like writing about it is helpful. I actually had a student who did write an ebook when we went back to school. And she wrote about how parents, she heard them whispering. She didn't know what it was. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, they told her they had to move to a new place. And then they were on lockdown. And so how she was living in fear that something would happen that she didn't see coming. It was really healing for her. I think she was better after that. But I think there are a lot that maybe aren't considering it or don't want to talk about it. And I think your workshop of the healing power of writing, that's a fascinating angle to take.
I think a lot of students, because they haven't had a lot of experience, it may take many years before they realize just how bizarre a time that was. All the effects that it had on all of us. It's kind of the norm because it was just a normal part of their lives for a couple of years.
40 years of teaching writing, Nancy, that's so much experience. Are there any mistakes you made early in your career that you were like, oh my goodness, that was not the right way to do this?
When I went to writing school, when I got my MFA in creative writing, the philosophy, I learned a ton from that particular program. But the philosophy was sort of that, we brought you in here because we know you can write. So now we're going to tell you what you're doing wrong and how to do better. And it was a very competitive program. And I made really great friends there, but there was definitely this competitive overall tone of everything. Gradually, as I started teaching writing, I thought, this is not the way people learn. I learned the most by having others point out what I was doing well and then saying, I need to build on this. This other stuff isn't really contributing the way this is. And so I really tried to adjust my teaching so that it was focused on, what are the strengths of the student writer? What do they do well? What can they build upon? I don't want students to leave the classroom never wanting to write again. I want them to feel like there's some foundation that they can build upon. And I want them to feel excitement about the possibilities instead of discouraged about everything that's wrong.
I was so thankful for a high school teacher that thought I was a good writer, but also, I'm still terrible at commas. I've actually learned that because I write like I talk without the accent. But a lot of times she would not really drill down deep into the mechanics, trying to get us to write the creativity. But the funny thing is now sometimes I'll intentionally just write like I write because I've had people say, if writing is too perfect, I think it's AI and I'm not going to read it. And I think that's such a fascinating place we've come to, which was before, if I ever made a mistake on my blog, people would just take me to town. Well, you're an educator and you're supposed to do everything just right. And now it's kind of like, hey, I want to see a few flaws. Are we to a point with AI that flaws are okay?
I know. I was really thinking that this last semester because I haven't had too much trouble with students using AI for up until this semester. Because normally, if they took a creative writing class, it's because they wanted to write. It started to creep in this last semester, especially only really in my intro class. It wasn't the upper level students. It was the ones that were taking it for a gen ed credit. And if I get something that's perfect grammar, perfect punctuation, I know it's not them because I never get that from my students. So I was sort of overjoyed sometimes when I saw mistakes. At the same time, I do have a philosophy that, a lot of students will tell me that they're not good writers. They'll say, I'm not a good writer because I have this idea of what I'm going to write. And then I start writing and something totally different comes out. And I'm like, no, that's what good writing is. It's taking detours. It's not being perfect on the first try. Because if you write something perfectly on the first try, you are shutting down the process. Really, if you take detours and you explore those and you follow those, then you create something deeper, richer, better. ultimately. It just takes more time.
And writing is thinking. You think as you write, and sometimes you don't know how you feel, and you write to figure out how you feel. So to me, writing is tied to who I am as a human being.
Such an important point. One time I was teaching in a third grade class, and I explained the concept of free writing to them. And then I said, okay, now I gave them a prompt, and I said, now write. And the teacher said, wait, everybody stop, put down your pencils or pens. I want you to think for a few minutes before you start to write. And I'm like, no. We don't want them to think before they write. We want them to think as they write. We want them to think on paper. Because if you think before you write, you shut down your process too fast.
My best stuff is, what am I feeling right now? I just write. There's people who are pantsers and people who are planners, but not everybody's a planner.
And I honestly think that most of us experienced writers are combinations of pantsers and planners. We do some planning, some pantsing. We go back and forth between those things.
And of course, when we say pantsing, for those of you who don't know, that's seat of the pants, right? People who plan ahead and then people who just sit down and write. And Nancy, this has been delightful. We could talk all day about writing. I know you have a lot of books. Nancy McCabe, 9 books, 40 years of teaching writing. I personally think writing is more important than ever because you have to be able to successfully prompt. And I was teaching an AI art lesson this week, and I was saying, what do you want this particular thing? They had sketched on paper what they wanted. What do you want this to look like? Okay, do you want it photorealistic or do you want it a cartoon? Do you want it gloomy or do you want it with vibrant colors? And we're just going through it. And they said, wow, you need a lot of words to make art now, don't you? It's like, yeah, actually, words that unlock everything now.
I love that. We really do have to have writing skills even to deal with AI.
Thank you, Nancy McCabe. We'll check out in the show notes all the links to all of her resources. This is some great experience, the prompts that she's talked about, perhaps take a field trip. I love the idea of imitating other authors with swapping out similar word for word. That's fascinating. So Nancy, thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Thank you, Nancy. Check out the show notes at coolcatteacher.com. Now, we're going to shift to go behind the scenes of a popular kids podcast, Who's Smarted? As we talk with the show's host, Jerry Kolber. Your kids probably listen to this show in class, but Jerry also shares concepts for teaching any subject and making it engaging. Let's take a listen. Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis.
So excited today to be talking with Jerry Kolber. He is the creator of educational TV shows, including Brain Games at Nat Geo and Brainchild at Netflix. But he also has 2 podcasts that a lot of you teachers will have heard of, Who's Smarted and Mysteries About True Histories. So, Jerry, what is the purpose of your podcast specifically?
First of all, thanks for having me on the show. I love what you're doing. I can tell you we started creating podcasts for kids and families in classrooms because we just saw a need for screen-free entertainment that was also educational. We started during the pandemic when the kids were on the screens all the time. It seems like they might be on them even more now. So our goal was to create podcasts that you could listen to anywhere, classroom, car, homeschool, bedtime, that would be educational and fun for kids and parents.
Okay, so describe for us some of your most popular shows so teachers can get a flavor for the things that you're sharing about.
Mysteries About True Histories is this really fun show about these 2 kids who solve mysteries in their hometown. They use math, logic, and history to solve the problems. So it's a show where these 2 kids encounter mysteries every episode, and they have to use all kinds of gadgets and thinking. And the kids listening get to play along and also solve problems along with the kids of the show. So that's a fun scripted kind of adventure mystery series. Then our other show, Who's Smarted, has been going for about 4 years now. We have about 600,000 listeners a month, really growing huge. And the reason it's gotten so big is it's a 15-minute show that each episode tackles a different topic around history or the human body or space, something that kids are always asking about. And we have the narrator who takes them through a journey and helps them learn all about whatever that week's topic is. Because the shows are short, like 15 minutes, parents love to put them on in the car. Teachers love to use them in classroom during transition time. That show is a real kind of, Who's Smart is like an encyclopedia of like everything.
So what are the most popular shows ever on Who's Smarted?
Anytime we do any show about food, it's super popular. So the one we did about gummy bears was incredibly popular. Kids seem to love anytime we do any kind of digestion stuff, human body stuff. So we did a whole episode about how you digest. Kids love that one. And just random stuff sometimes pops, like we did an episode on Minecraft the kids loved. Anytime we do anything on food or the human body, that seems to really be popular with the kids.
Awesome. So the educators that you're talking to that are using your shows, how are they using them in the classroom?
Thank you for asking that. That's a great question. We know that we're used in like something like 20,000 classrooms around the country now. And what we hear most is that educators are using the shows to help with transition time. So whether that's getting the classroom shifted to the next subject, or they're often using it coming back from lunch or recess as a way to get the kids settled down. So the kids are sitting, they're listening, they're paying attention. They don't even realize necessarily that they're learning. They're just having fun listening to Who Smarted, but it's a great way for teachers to transition the kid back into the classroom.
So if you had your dream, you're talking to a teacher, they're talking about your podcasts. What is your dream that you wish that teachers would say about your shows and the impact they have on kids?
Wow, that's a cool question. I would say this is true for teachers and we also get used in a lot of homeschool families. And so the thing I'd always want to hear is, we love that your show gets our kids excited about learning. We love that it gets them curious about learning. And we love that your shows are also fun for adults to listen to. So it's co-listening that everyone can listen to together. Those are the three big things.
So you're obviously meeting a need. People are saying, hey, I need some stuff non-screen time. And we know that listening skills have declined here in the United States. I mean, there's a test for that. You get your standardized testing and you would see listening. Are there some things you do to promote the listening skills that go along with your podcast?
Yeah, our shows, both Mysteries About True Histories and Who Smarted, both of these podcasts have points in the show where we ask questions. It's not like we stop down for a quiz, but the kids, after you listen to one or two episodes, they realize, oh, we're going to ask them to help solve a problem. And if you're going to solve that problem, which is fun, you better have listened to the rest of the episode. So they start to pay attention. And in Who Smarted, do little mini quizzes that we use like every 3 or 4 minutes to hook the kids, make sure that their brains are really processing, and it works. They really do pay attention and they really do participate.
So you mentioned very early in the show that perhaps kids have more screen time than ever. Are you passionate about helping reduce that screen time but still improve learning?
Yes, I am. In fact, as you mentioned, we used to do a lot of TV shows for kids, and we will still do them at some point. But we realized when we saw the research during the pandemic of how really not great it is for kids' brains to be on the screens as much as they are. We thought, let's come up with a way to do what we do, have impact, get kids curious, help them learn, but without screens. I am passionate about it. There was a book that just came out, a guy named Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, that is all about the increase in anxiety and depression among kids because of the amount of time they're spending on screens. Like the research is it's just very clear. So I am passionate about providing ways for kids to learn and for parents to have fun learning with them that don't involve looking at a screen.
And I want to point out something. Your shows are human produced. Now, artificial intelligence is getting to the point, I've seen some demos very, very recently where it can kind of automatically generate these, quote, podcast sounding episodes about content. And I want to make a really important point here that the same errors that we have with generative text will happen with generative podcasts, and it will be very, very difficult to tell. So personally, I just want to interject that I think that human produced podcasts, not just because I'm a human produced podcast, but human produced podcasts are going to be more important than ever, knowing the people who are behind the podcast, because there is about to be a massive proliferation, teachers, of content that, quote, sounds good, but might not have been checked by a human. So, Jerry, this is kind of the conversation of the moment among podcasters. Do you have any opinions about the AI-generated podcasts? Of course, there's AI-generated voices. I could fix little pieces of what I've said, but do you have an opinion on this particular topic?
I have a very strong opinion. I think my opinion is the same as your opinion, which is human-produced podcasts have a human touch and a human connection that I don't, maybe someday AI will be able to do that, but the AI demos I've seen are so cold. I mean, they are filled with misinformation, but they just also sound like a machine, right? To me, an AI generated podcast that has a coldness to it and lacks the human wit, just the humanity, starts to feel a little bit like may as well just be watching a screen, right? Because it's not engaging your brain in the way that a human-made show does. Now, 5 years from now, Vicky, we might be having a different conversation. But right now, I'm a huge fan of use AI where you can to help maybe with some of the more back end stuff, that early stuff. But the shows need to be made by humans.
Yes, I've very recently heard some very convincing sounding podcast content, and there was no stamp, there was no disclosure that it was artificial intelligence. And as an educator, I just believe that human stamp on all of our content. Because here's the thing, Jerry, if I disagree with something you say on Hugh Smarted, I can email you, right? Like I can say, hey, that content might not be correct. And then you can go back and then you can fix it. But when it's done by a bot army, where is that accountability?
There is not. And we love hearing from our fans. I mean, when people call us or email us and say, there's an issue they had with the show or they loved something. My business partner, Adam Davis, who's the other creator of these shows, he tends to do more of the engagement with folks, but he's always emailing and talking to our fans, teachers, homeschool families, and doing whatever we can to support them and make sure that they feel that they're getting a great product from us and something that they're comfortable using. I just don't see that at this point with AI. I agree. Like, you just aren't going to get that kind of engagement.
Okay, Jerry, so as we finish up, how do teachers get started listening to your shows?
Super easy. One of the things we love about these shows is if you've got a computer, an iPhone, anything that's connected to the internet and a podcast app, look up Who Smarted and Mysteries About True Histories, or go to whosmarted.com. And that's where our show is. So it's very easy to find. Who Smarted with question mark. You don't need any subscription or any special apps. You can play it anywhere, no charge, and use it in your classroom or your home or your school.
And
teachers can get the show anywhere that they're getting your podcast, on any podcast app, anywhere they have a Wi-Fi connection and access to podcasts. But I will mention for classroom educators, if they go to whosmarted.com, we actually offer a totally free subscription to Who Smarted Plus for all classroom educators so they can use the ad-free version of the show in the classroom. So whosmarted.com, click educators, put your email in, and within seconds, you'll have access to the ad-free version for classroom use.
I make an important point that may seem obvious, but as somebody who also podcasts and has over 850 episodes, searching the back podcasts, the ones that have already been released, you're going to have a lot of resources and find something that aligns with your curriculum right now if you go look at their back episodes and pull those up and listen to them. You don't have to just listen to what comes out now. You can go back and listen to all that stuff. It's all up there. And it's just a very useful way to bring it into your classroom. So, Jerry, thanks for coming on the show. Jerry Kolber. TV shows are Brain Games and Brainchild. The podcasts are Who Smarted and Mysteries About True Histories. So thanks for coming on the show, Jerry.
Thank you, Vicky. It's a pleasure.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicky Davis. Welcome back to Cool Cat Teacher Talk. This is John Davis, the producer of the show. When I was in middle school, I know we had fun going Who Smarted as we listened to Jerry Kolber's show. Hope you've enjoyed today's show. You can download the show notes in the guest bio at coolcatteacher.com and can subscribe to this show on your favorite podcatcher or on YouTube. We thank you for listening, and as always, see you later, educator. Stay in the loop. Visit coolcatteacher.com. Follow at coolcatteacher everywhere you connect.
Cool Cat Teacher Talk is now a podcast, so subscribe in your favorite podcatcher. This is Vicky Davis with Cool Cat Teacher Talk. See you later, educator.